All right, students, we're getting started with Monday's lecture. It's probably going to be a two-parter. This is what should be in your notebook so far. We've got a long set of notes called Unit 1 notes, and we're not done with them. And then Friday we did page 2, which is called Payment Calculations. And now we're going to start a short one called Economic Systems. It's going to be page 3 in your notebook. And so what we're going to do here, just title this paper, you don't need the Roman numeral 7, just title your paper Economic Systems, okay? And this is usually one multiple choice question on the exam. This statement I'm about to make, you're going to hear all year long. There's, I think, 55 multiple choice questions, and there's 3 essays. The first essay is a big one. It's like 10 parts. And I can pretty much tell you, not exactly, but 80-90% what's going to be on question number 1. Because it follows a certain format. So we're going to spend all 4 months getting you ready for essay number 1. Because if you remember my strategy from the other day, you get a decent multiple choice score. Once you get 3 or 4 points on essay number 1, which is not hard to do, if you pay attention to me, you've got a 3. The big worry is essay questions 2 and 3. Because they're usually on minor topics, and we don't know what they're going to be on. So they do that on purpose. That means they give us a list of like 50 things to teach. We have to teach all 50 things because even if we think a topic is minor, it might be essay question number 2 or essay question number 3. Now keep in mind, if you bomb essay question 2 and 3, you're very likely still to pass anyway. But, if you want a 4 or a 5, you need to ace essay questions 2 and 3. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about these minor topics. So economic systems is probably going to be one multiple choice question on the exam. Yet I'm going to spend 25 minutes on it today, just in case. So you get that one multiple choice question right, and just in case, it's one of the essay questions and it's worth like 10 points. All right, there's 3 types of economic systems in the world. There is the centrally planned economy. Okay, that's known as the command. I want you to underline command. You are probably never going to see the word socialist or communist on AP macro exam. I would be shocked. Because of this election this year and just politics in general, they generally stay away from the word socialist or communist or even capitalist because they just want to avoid controversy. The book you're using for this class is called Krugman's Economics. Paul Krugman is a very liberal, most people would call him a left-wing economist. He's very critical of Republicans and capitalism in general, but his name is on the book. But he didn't write it. It was written they used his name because he's so famous. The lady really in charge of writing it was named Margaret Ray, and if you look on the book, you'll see Krugman's Economics, and you'll see her name underneath that. She wrote the book, and it's something I'm very proud of. When I went to AP training, she actually taught me. So she's got a PhD in economics. She teaches someplace up in Virginia. She's brilliant, very smart, and she wrote this textbook. And she said something in class one day, and she said, somebody asked something about socialism, and she goes, I don't let my students use that word. Now, this is a college class, and she won't let them use the word socialism. And we were like, why? She goes, because nobody understands it. She goes, when one of my students uses the word socialism, I say, stand up and explain it or get out. And she was kind of intimidating. When we asked to go to the bathroom, she would say no. So, and she would never smile. She'd just keep teaching. So we just quit asking and started going. So I think that's her sense of humor. I really liked her. I think she's, a smart, nice woman. But, she's got this funky sense of humor. But so I remember thinking when she said this about socialism, I remember thinking, I got a master's in European history. I can dadgum sure explain socialism. But I was intimidated by her, so I didn't say crap. Half the time in life, you will stay out of trouble if you just do not open your mouth. Anyway, so I stayed away from it. I'm only mentioning it here because I want my class, if at all possible, to be interesting. I know that Generation Z is very interested in socialism and Marxism and communism. You should have all taken European history. But anyway, too late for that pretty much. All right, so there's a planned or a command economy. The second type is the free market economy, which is what we mostly have, and that is a capitalist economy. By the way, there's this organization of rich countries. I don't even know the number. It's like the G7 to G8. I don't know how many countries are in it, but every single one of them is capitalist. Russia's in it, but Russia doesn't belong there. It's Japan, the United States, Germany, Canada. I think Australia's in it. The Chinese are in it, but what's interesting is they used socialism for years and years and years, and Deng Xiaoping changed all of that. They brought in free market reforms, and so I cannot explain the Chinese economic system except that it's socialism and capitalism together. The Russians, like I said, because they got nukes, I think they just let them in to try to keep them peaceful. But that is the richest organizations in the world. They're all capitalist. So if you want to have a wealthy country, and number two is the way, none of the ones, with the exception of China, have made it that far. And lastly is a mixed economy. And so here's what I want you to write for mixed economy. Mixed economy is an economy that has elements of both. Okay? And I want you to write this as well. That's the kind we have. We have a mixed economy. There's very few full-on command economies. The big ones, there's, I think, 2 left. The big ones failed or gave up on it. And there's no real full-out capitalist countries. But there's some that are pretty close. So if you think of a continuum, if we were in class, I'd write this on the board. I'd put, the brackets and draw a line between them. And I would put socialism on the left, and capitalism on the right. And I would put us about 70% on the right. I don't know what it is. So we are heavily weighted towards capitalism. Someone like Norway, now those of you fascinated with socialism, whatever that is, people always talk about, Bernie Sanders always says he admires Denmark. Norway is the one to look at. And I don't know anybody from Norway. I don't know anybody from Denmark. For some reason, I know tons of people from Sweden. I keep meeting people from Sweden that have dual citizenship. It's another one of those Scandinavian socialist countries. But all those countries, Norway and Denmark and Sweden, they are all capitalist countries. Anyway, someday if you're interested in this, we can have a unique discussion on this. But you can go Google it. Those are all capitalist countries, but they have a heavy social welfare system. All right, so we're going to talk about these first, centrally planned economies. You don't need to write socialism or communism down here again. By the way, if you ever want to know Marx's ideas on socialism and communism, I'm more than happy to spend a day with you on that, or 15 or 20 minutes. It will not be on the AP macro exam, just to make you educated on this topic. I'm sure Anshel does some of it. Obviously, I teach European history, and they're the ones that came up with this stuff. I will throw this little tidbit in. A lot of people don't know this. The Pilgrims actually tried a communal or socialist system. When the first people came here, they weren't against socialism, really. The Pilgrims actually had an idea. I think the people of Jamestown, they were looking for gold. I think they were capitalists. But up at Massachusetts Bay Colony, whatever they called it, at Plymouth up there, they had no such antipathy against socialism. I don't want to get in trouble over saying this, but I can back all this up. In the book of Acts from the Bible, the early Christians practiced communal living where they all brought their incomes together and shared them. That is just a fact. And, nobody knows what happened to that. They didn't keep that system. So possibly the Pilgrims were trying to copy that. But the Pilgrims had a communal socialist, a flat-out socialist system they tried to use, I believe, for 2 years. And if you want to quote me on that and somebody says, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm used to hearing that. I can give you the details, but you can Google that. But after, I think it was 2 years, Bradford or whoever was in charge, Winthrop, I don't know what the guy's name is, they gave it up. And, and then, you can look up the reasons why they gave it up. So anyway, let's move on. Centrally planned economies. All right. So here's the thing you got to understand about this. Now, I'm talking about the real socialist countries. The people using this term democratic socialism, that's like Fabian socialism. That's not, and I'm not trying to insult those people, that's not real. That's not socialism, at least like Marx intended it to be. In one of these countries, the key word is central planning. So underline central planning here. And Stalin is the best example. And I made what sounded like a joke about him the other day. It really wasn't a joke. Stalin took over the Soviet Union, after Lenin died, and he decided they were going to industrialize. So he got a bunch of people in a room and goes, we're going to industrialize, and they came up with a 5-year plan. And it was spectacularly successful. They were going to build like bridges and highways, and they were going to build, people in Russia didn't have electricity. And so it was one of the most backward countries in the world. And so they were going to electrify the grid. And they did. And somewhere in the process, 10 to 20 million people died for various reasons. He shot a bunch of them starved down in Ukraine. I mean, but there's no but to it. It was bad. But if you just want to look at, did it succeed? Yes. But here's the thing. What the people wanted did not matter. He told you where to live. He told you what job you were going to do. If you died, they dug a hole and buried you if you were lucky. He was very, very focused on achieving his goal. And his second 5-year plan, he was actually going to try and build something for the people, but he got interrupted by this little thing called World War II. Anyway, so that's a centrally planned economy. A centrally planned economy, these people sit in a room and they decide, here's what we're going to make this year. And so the people in the country have no say-so, no choice. So if you want to be able to go down and buy a car and have 30 choices with different colors and transmissions and all that stuff like we worked on Friday, a command system is not for you. There will be no choices like that. All right, so here's the key thing. Owns all the resources and decides what to produce, how much to produce, and who will receive it. That's called the 3 economic questions. They don't put that on the exam anymore, but that's what that is. It's all decided for you, and there is no choice. And again, what the people want does not matter. Okay? And you would think people could just leave, but if you know your history, you know what these countries did to people who tried to leave. All right, examples. Cuba, North Korea, former Soviet Union, and China. I got the question mark there from China because obviously they changed their system to again, I don't explain it. They do have socialism and they do have capitalism. How they work together, I do not know. Soviet Union gave up. North Korea and Cuba are still, not a place I would think you would want to be, although Cuba does have pretty good health care. All right, moving on here. Okay, advantages and disadvantages. What's good about a planned economy? Now, you should already know, I don't like this stuff, okay? I had someone argue with me once about comparing Trump's wall, which doesn't exist as far as I know, or maybe not much of it, and compared it to the Berlin Wall, and I said, hold on. One is to keep people out, one's to keep people in. That's not the same thing, okay? It's like the old joke about the cemetery. They have to build a fence around it. People are dying to get in. The deal is, as you can tell, I am not a fan of this. Remember where I was born, if you watch my bio video, in Miami. Hanging out with the Cubans, at least back then, you are not going to say anything good. Now, the younger ones, yes, maybe. But the older ones, and they were still around when I was, in the 60s growing up there. All right, let's talk about this. Low unemployment. So here's what I'm saying. I'm going to reach down hard to say something good about this system because that's what a good teacher tries to do. And maybe I'm not a good teacher, but I'm trying to be. I'm going to give you both sides. You got to give it to them. There's no unemployment over there. If the government is in charge of the economy, they will give everybody a job. Now, you may not get to pick what you want. You may be picking up trash. I mean, I studied this one guy who was like a top student. He was a top athlete, and he went into the military and loved the military and wanted to stay, but they forced him to join the KGB, their spy agency. He didn't want to do that, but the decision was made at the top for him. Low unemployment, everyone has a job, great job security, government does not go out of business. And the incomes, I'm fascinated with Cuba. I think you can tell for the reasons I've said why. I met some people from Cuba a few years ago, and I said, does everybody make the same? And they said no. I will tell you the story. When Obama was president, he kind of was trying to legalize, open up relations with Cuba. We've had blocked relations because of all the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that stuff back in the past. And he was trying to open up relations. I think he did. And ABC News sent a crew down there. And they were eating this restaurant, and they had this wonderful waiter. They were like, this is the best waiter we've ever had. And they asked the waiter, we were talking about Cuba. Turns out the waiter was a brain surgeon in the Cuban hospital. This is a true story. You can find it on YouTube. And he made, I think it was $30 a month. And so he was waitressing in the restaurant to make extra money. And the Americans were coming down. And apparently, this ABC News crew, they could have left a $50 tip. Well, think about that. If they leave him a $50 tip, that's more than he makes a whole month as a brain surgeon. We had a Cuban-American gentleman who was valedictorian a couple of years ago. I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story. And I met his father one day at Winn-Dixie, and I think the kid was kind of embarrassed. He introduced me to him, and I talked to him about 15 minutes, and he said they have a lot of trouble in Cuba with people who are doctors who want to go work in tourism now, because if you work in a hotel, you can get more in tips than you can, as a doctor. Anyway, so the deal is, but I did find out, talking to people from Cuba, the pay is not the same. There may not be much fluctuation, but everybody doesn't make the same amount of money. There is free health care, and Cuba's apparently got very good health care. All right. Supposedly there's little incentive to work harder. I mean, I'm sure they can do something to you. Stalin obviously would have. And there's supposedly little incentive to come up with good ideas. I do know, and if you're upset about me mentioning Stalin, I mean, I studied Stalin in college. And one of Stalin's trick was he would put quotas out there. He'd tell the factories you have to make so much. And one of his favorite tricks was he'd send the secret police out. If they didn't meet the quota, he would have like the entire management team executed. No competition, and that's not funny, but it was apparently effective. They did everything they could. So this idea that there was no incentive to meet the quota, yes, there is. No competition to keep the quality of goods poor. So here's a story I like to tell. I'm trying to be very positive here, but I need to give you both sides. So there were two countries side by side for 40 years in Europe, East Germany and West Germany. The people's DNA is identical. When the wall went up, they were brothers and sisters and parents and spouses trapped on both sides of the wall. So you can take all DNA questions, all inherited wealth questions. These are identically the same genetic people. The West German side was helped out by the Americans and the British and the French. You should have learned this. I guess in U.S. history you didn't get this far last year. But world history, you should have gotten a taste of this. We go into great detail in European history. Oh, this is fun stuff to talk about. I'm going to show you a picture here in a minute. And what they did was we bulked up West Germany. And West Germany is hardcore capitalist. Now, they got free health care. They got all the rest of that stuff. So it's a mixed economy, but they are hardcore capitalists. And so East Germany was trapped under the socialist system, and obviously they had the wall between them. So in East Germany, they had a car they made. I remember the name being the Trabant. The Trabant. But I recently looked it up to show some videos. These are hysterical. The actual name was the Trabi. I was close. Tradi. If you want to see some funny stuff, just go put Trabi fail or Yugo fail. There's another one in there in YouTube. You're going to see some funny stuff. And so what happened was when socialism was collapsing all across Europe, every one of those countries that had a straight-jacketed command system collapsed around from 89 to 92, including the Soviet Union itself. What happened was the East Germans wanted to get out of East Germany. And they knew they could get shot if they crossed the border. So remember, in these countries, you have very little freedom. So in that country, you had to ask for permission to go on vacation. Well, if you went to Czechoslovakia, another socialist country, they would let you. Well, Czechoslovakia didn't treat their people as bad as the East Germans did. Czechoslovakia had an open border with Austria, which had an open border with Germany, West Germany. So what the East Germans would do is they'd have to ask permission to go on vacation in Czechoslovakia, and the government would say yes. They'd stamp their papers. They would, and they took these Trabis. In a Trabant, apparently the top speed was about 35 miles an hour, because that's all the country made. It's the only car they had, apparently. And so what they did is they crammed like 8 family members in a Trabi. Now it's only about able to go like 22 miles an hour, and they would go into Czechoslovakia. Then they would hightail it over across the border in Austria. Now, Austria was officially neutral during the Cold War, but it was a capitalist country like all the rest of these on the western side. And then they would get into West Germany. Oh my goodness. What do they drive on in West Germany? The Autobahn. Have you heard of this thing? No speed limit. They would get up on the Autobahn. Now they're in these East German Trabis that can just barely run. They're going 22 miles an hour. Well, West Germany has way more than one car. Let me see. Is Porsche German? I don't know. I don't know enough about cars. I know BMW is West German. I believe Audi is. Definitely Mercedes. And you had all these BMWs and Mercedes up on the Autobahn going 130 miles an hour. And here comes these East Germans escaping. That shows you the difference between a command economy and a capitalist economy. You can look those videos up on YouTube. I was around for that. I was around when every single country in Eastern Europe became free. Albania was pretty funny. Albania, the number one name in Albania became like Bush. So they were, for George H.W. Bush, not the Bush we just had, his father. They were naming all their kids because they just loved America, and they were, for 40 years, they had nothing, and they wanted to possess things. All right, moving on. Free market system. Just put laissez-faire. So right now, now remember, we're not 100% here, and I just bought property on the Swanee in October, and on the Swanee River, it's a dream of mine, and all I wanted was electricity, and I foolishly assumed that I could have a power pole put on my property. It took me 3 months. I had to have a septic tank. It had to be so many feet from the border. It had to be so many feet from the 100-year flood. It's taken me months. I had to pay $500 for a health department permit, to pay $500 for the building department permit. I had to pay $300 to join the. I have all these rules and restrictions, and I finally got aggravated with the health department guy. I said, I spent $13,000 trying to get electricity, and my little camper only cost $3,000. I paid $13,000 to get electricity to a $3,000 camper. I was just so frustrated. So we are mostly laissez-faire, but there are government restrictions in this country. Okay? But for the most part, in a free market country, like right here in Apopka, if you want to make pink umbrellas, have at it. I'm sure you can't operate in a neighborhood, maybe in a garage if it's a small business, but if you want to make pink umbrellas, you can. Individuals own the resources, and and so if you want something, you buy it. If you don't, they don't. And so here's the deal. The opportunity to make a profit gives people an incentive. Highly incentivized, and that's the key to the thing here. The Popeyes chicken sandwich was a big deal last year. And I don't know if you've had one. I'm a big fan of chicken sandwiches. I like KFC and Zaxby's chicken sandwiches, but I gotta say, that Popeyes chicken sandwich, the spicy one, is a cut above. But here's the deal. If you didn't like it, Popeyes will quit making it. As long as they make them and people like them, and they keep showing up at the drive-thru. If you remember when they finally got them in stock over there, whatever, they had everything they needed to make them. Remember the drive-thru would back out down that side street over there. I mean, that's the deal. They want to make a profit, so they're going to give you what you want. Wide variety of goods. And here you go. Competition and self-interest work together to regulate the economy. So because I don't know what Zaxby's doing or KFC, but if I was KFC or Zaxby's or even that Maryland fried chicken they have in front of Walmart, I would be going to war with Popeyes. If they're stealing your customers, you got to fire back with a better sandwich. Tell you what, I'm a pickup truck driver, and Chevy and Ford have gone at it for years. I mean, there's competition and self-interest. They work together. The invisible hand. This lecture is already longer than I wanted it to be. It's the concept that society's goals will be met as individuals seek their own interest. Now, you hear people all the time say capitalism sucks, capitalism is selfish. True and true. Nobody would argue with that. But, for the most part, if they do not, like Apple, every now and then I'll have some Generation Z kid, like shaking Apple, an iPhone, that means, hey, capitalism is evil. And I'm like, is that an iPhone in your hand? Think about that. That is the very symbol of corporate capitalism. That there, I mean, you can't come up with a better example than an iPhone. And so the deal is, if they did not, now I have an Android, which is the same principle. It's hardcore competition. But the deal is, if they don't put the features you want on the iPhone, you'll go over and get an Android. So they know they've got to produce. All right, society wants fuel-efficient cars. They'll make more. All right. We're going to just skip all this, but this is the idea that there it is. Competition and self-interest act as an invisible hand. Okay? If the price of eggs is $15 a dozen, I asked the kids this last year, if it's $15 a dozen, what would you do? And the kids are like, not buy eggs. I'm like, that's not all you would do. I got a big house over here. My kids are grown. You take an extra bedroom, start raising chickens. $15 a dozen eggs. You start raising chickens in the bathtub everywhere. If everyone starts raising chickens and putting signs out on the road saying, dozen eggs, I'll sell it to you for $12 a dozen. If everyone's selling eggs, what is going to happen to the price? It goes down. Now that is the invisible hand. It's just like an invisible hand came out, put his hand on the scale, and pushed the price down. Eventually, once eggs get down to like $1 a dozen, I don't even know what they cost now, but they're cheap, people are going to quit doing that. And that is the invisible hand. That is the beauty of the market. And I am not even going to act like I'm unbiased and don't believe in this. Now, there are examples where it doesn't work. Let's go on. And here's the deal. Adam Smith is the guy behind this. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectively than when he really intends to promote it. One of the criticisms of capitalism is it damages the environment. Well, if you had a company that's damaging the environment, just tell them you're not going to buy their product. Whatever they're doing, they'll stop. Negatives. Okay. Wealth inequality, absolutely. People are going to get rich. I heard somebody say the other day that if you were to take all the wealth in the country now, divide it all up, and start giving everybody equal paychecks, for every 3 people, 20 years from now, one of them would be rich, and the other 2 would be poor. Why? Because one person is going to save most of what they get. A lot of people are going to spend it. And so some people have better, and so what's going to happen is, if you took all the money divided equally, 20 years from now, there'd be rich people again and poor people again. Okay? So the deal is, I didn't say that, but I kind of agree with it. There are, just like some of your friends study, some of your friends don't. People do not study equally. There's wealth inequality, absolutely, in a capitalist system. Really bad wealth economy. It creates an economy built on consumption, which means for it to function, you need people to buy stuff. Places the need of the company over that of the individual. I would agree with that too. They drive their employees hard. Believe me, I worked in corporate America. I'd much rather be a teacher. These are valid criticisms. Unproductive people, if you're not producing, you're going to get left behind. And, if you have unregulated capitalism, one company could take over another company. All right, I love this picture. To me, you're like, Mr. Russell, you're crazy. It's a picture of the cereal aisle. To this day, when I stand in the cereal aisle at Winn-Dixie, I am awed. This is a perfect example of capitalism. Look at that. When I was a kid, we had Crunch Berries. And then after 5 or 6 years of Captain Crunch, we had Captain Crunch when I was a kid. We didn't have Crunch Berries. But after 5 or 6 years eating Captain Crunch, they introduced Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries. Then I noticed 10 years later you could buy just Crunch Berries. And now there's peanut butter. There's all these different types. One of my favorite types of cereal, we used to eat oatmeal, is they have oatmeal flavored cereal, like 10 different types. Imagine sending a 5-year-old kid, that's what my mom used to do. She'd go, honey, go pick out a cereal that you want. How can a 5-year-old kid make a decision in a place like this? There are too many choices. And so this is pure capitalism. And I know some people think this is evil, but I think this is great. There are criticisms, sweatshops, and you've all heard about Nike and some of these other places in the sweatshops. that they are buying stuff made, and some of it's made by prisoners. I do know when I taught AP Geography there, we used to learn a lot about China, and there's a city in China that makes like 99% of all the ties in the world. And all right, so a couple more examples here. We talked about East Germany and West Germany. So what I'm about to show you here is a city street in East Germany. I'm going to show it to you in 1991 when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. I'm going to show you what it looked like then, and then 12 years later under a capitalist regime. So it's under a command system, a Soviet-style straitjacketed economy where the decisions are made at the top. Now these are apartment buildings. So let me pull this down. Let's go back here. Let me pull this back up here. This is the East German street. Now I'm going to struggle to say something good about this, okay? Because you can look at the two. Where would you rather live? I mean, there's a tree down here. It's painted. It's nice and neat. There's no junk cars there around. It looks like a happy place. I would want to be there. This looks like, Dante's Inferno or something. But, all right, I'll say something good. Well, in the country at the top, free healthcare. And you did not have to pay for that apartment. It was free. Now, the government told you which floor, which room, and if something broke, they might not be in a hurry to fix it. Because where are you going to go? You have to live where they tell you to live. It's managed by them. Maybe they let you choose. Maybe there was some choice, but for the most part, these decisions were made for you because you weren't allowed to own a house or land. Now, under the system down here below, that's the same street. What they did was, basically, this is a great story I tell in European history. When the Berlin Wall came down, the West Germans were desperate to have the East Germans back. So West Germany, which is still one of the richest countries in the world, bought East Germany, basically. They paid them out. And so what happened was there was a massive transfer of wealth from West Germany over to East Germany. Now, I guess, I've never been to Germany. I've been right up on the border, been to Belgium. I wasn't far from Germany. But now I gather that, you really can't tell the difference between the two. But East Germany was really, 40 years behind West Germany. So this example of two countries, same DNA. And now look at the bottom down here. Now somebody owns this building and he wants to rent it to people, right? So he paints it, he fixes it up. I'm sure if the air conditioner's broke, he's going to get somebody to fix it so you don't leave. That's the good stuff. The bad stuff is if you don't pay the rent, he'll throw you out. Okay, and he probably raises the rent a lot. So I'm giving you good and bad of both systems. And here's another one. This is North Korea and South Korea after dark. South Korea, this is once again was the Cold War. North Korea was dominated by the Russians and the Chinese with a centrally planned economy. It's still centrally planned, although the guy over there now doesn't listen to Russia or China anymore. And South Korea is just like us. I mean, they have, Hyundai. I'm pretty sure, I don't know, if I had students in the room, usually they'll catch me if I don't want to give a Japanese brand. Samsung, Hitachi, Daewoo, that's a car. I'm pretty sure those are all South Korean. Two countries, same DNA, and that is 40 years difference. And so you can see the differences right there between a heavily command system and a heavily market system like South Korea. And so there's the big differences there. And I spent probably way too much time on this, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Let's see what else we got here. Remember, we are in a mixed economy with the best, or maybe the worst, of both. In here, when this lecture was written years ago, GDP is the amount of goods a country produces. North Korea's GDP is 13 billion, and South Korea's was 1.6 trillion. So there's a huge difference. I do know that the average North Korean male is 3 inches shorter than the average South Korean male. The North Korean men are basically the same size as South Korean women. That is actually in your textbook way back in, I think they call it Unit 6 in this textbook, one of the productivity chapters, simply because there's not enough protein up in North Korea. They go hungry in the north. Okay. All right, and here is on the 2012 exam. I try to do this a lot. I try to show you a multiple choice question. And what's the answer? Yes. And we spent 30 minutes of our life on this. And at this point, I'm going to stop this lecture, which has its own title. If any of you are offended by anything I said, I did try to give both sides, I did say good things about that horrible looking apartment building because they couldn't kick you out. But I mean, I am an American. I grew up in this system. I was trained in business school to account, as an accounting major for this system. And I feel pretty good about it. I do know that there's wealth inequality. All right, but at any point when you guys come into class, I'd love to have a discussion about this at any point in time.